Hey, Centerpoint. Um, I'm I'm doing a video Bible study for us this Tuesday. Sorry that I can't do it live. Um, this is supposed to be spring break week, and Kim and the kids were supposed to be going to Texas, and I was actually supposed to be going to Atlanta to do a 3-day conference called Training the Trainer to teach me how to train church planners to go through the process that Chris is doing. So Chris's job as the church planting catalyst is to recruit and help and support church planners that are coming to Connecticut, and they're training me to be the guy that trains them to go through the steps. So Chris is the front man, and I'm the guy behind the scenes, doing the little things behind there. But I can't officially do it until I have this training, and the training has become virtual because of the virus. And so here we are. I'm actually going to be on this computer from 9 o'clock this morning and work with the training the trainer until about 4 o'clock, and then at 4 o'clock I do my Russian school tutoring on the computer until 9 o'clock in the evening. So I'm going to be on the computer for 12 hours, and I'm not going to be able to do our 10 o'clock Tuesday Bible study. So I'm recording it so that we can do it here. Now, if you're looking, you'll see it's our Who's the One Bible study. I know when I before we started doing all this recording stuff, I thought you snap a finger and bam, you get nice little videos and visuals up on the screen. It's not so. You got to build all this stuff. You got to make it all work. And so just so that we could do this quickly and I don't have to spend any more time in front of this computer this week, I'm just going to use the Who's Your One thing. It lets me be able to switch back and forth between the web page and give us the Bible verses, and it also lets me go back and forth between those. So that's why I use the Who's Your One thing. It's already set up to use the web page, and so we'll be ready to go. So I'm so glad you're here with us. For those of you that have been doing our Tuesday Bible study with us, we've been going through the book of Romans, and I really hate that we can't be live for this chapter, but we're only going to do half of the chapter so that we can get together for the end of the chapter, because I really, really, really want us together at the end of the chapter. So Romans chapter 3. We're going to be in Romans chapter 3, and as always, we're looking at the New Living Translation. That's just what we do. Now, you can always, with your U version, there's a button here that says parallel. You can always pick that parallel button, and if you wanted to compare Romans chapter 3 in the New Living with Romans chapter 3 in the Christian Standard Bible, or whichever, the King James or whatever you want, you have that ability to be able to compare side by side to see the different ways they translate. And if you really want to study the Bible, that's a great way to see, if things are identical, or nearly identical. You're like, okay, well, this is probably very clearly written out in the Greek or the Hebrew. If it's something where they seem using different words here and there, and they're usually similar, but you might ask, why did this group of translators use this word, and why did this group use this word? And that's a place where commentaries help us to figure out the deeper meanings in some of those Greek words and those Greek texts. So let's go ahead and just dive on in, and we'll get started today. Romans chapter 3, verse 1. And I just want to, we mentioned this the other day, there's a literary device that Paul uses in Romans, and it's called the interlocutor. It's a guy that's off stage or whatever that's asking questions of Paul concerning things that he's talking about. And so it would be Paul's way of trying to maybe ask a rhetorical question, or to look at the people that he is writing to. And since he can't see them face to face, he can't Zoom with them, he has to find a way to try to answer some of their concerns, even if they're not there to actually ask some of these questions. And so Paul's going to begin that here in Romans chapter 3. We're going to see him starting to ask some of these questions. And so we have to ask ourselves, what is he doing as he asks these questions, and how do we respond to Paul as he is going through these questions? So let's go ahead and start Romans chapter 3, verse 1. It says, "Then what's the advantage of being a Jew? Is there any value in the ceremony of circumcision? So you see, these are those questions. The interlocutor is asking these questions. Remember, chapter 2, we talked about the problem of sin. We talked about how the Jews had sinned, the Greeks, the Gentiles had sinned. But we talked about how the Gentiles, in the long run, were going to respond to the word of God, that the Jews had some issues, and so this guy, he's writing to Jews in the synagogue. So the question he's asking, well, then should we all just give up being Jews? Is that no longer of value? And we'll find that in the broad stroke of history that the Christian faith moved away from its Jewish roots, and we're no longer bound under the Jewish laws. But Paul's saying, is there any value in the ceremony of circumcision? Yes, there's great benefits. First of all, the Jews were entrusted with the whole revelation of God. True, some of them were unfaithful, but just because they were unfaithful, does that mean that God will be unfaithful? Of course not. Even if everyone else is a liar, God is true. As the scriptures say about him, you will be proved right in what you say, and you will win your case in the court. So Paul starts off at the very beginning trying to assuage the fears of the Jews, trying to tell the Jews in Rome, this faith that you are engaging in, the way as it was called at the time, it's as you're becoming a Christian, there are increasingly more Gentiles that are becoming a part of the Christian. And the Gentiles were told that they didn't have to do all the Jewish laws. Remember when we did Acts chapter 15 and we saw the Jerusalem Council, there were some very specific things, no eating blood sacrificed to idols and no adultery. There were some very specific rules. They said, look, we want you to cut these things out of your secular life because those are against the entire scope of scriptures. But some of the other things, the circumcisions and the sacrifices at the temple, those are specific Jewish traditions and customs and Jewish laws, and you're not bound by them. And so in the Christian church, you have a mixture of these people. The Gentiles that aren't following all of the Jewish customs, and the Jews who are strictly to uphold these things, and they're trying to mesh together. And Paul's trying to tell the Jews that are there, there is still great benefit in following God and being a Jew. God gave you the whole revelation. I mean, they've lived their whole life being raised on the Old Testament, and you'll notice now there are a few Christian groups out there that disavow the Old Testament, that said Jesus got rid of it. But if we read Jesus' words clearly, Jesus clearly believed in the authority of the Old Testament. We clearly believe in the authority of the Old Testament. Jesus loved the Old Testament. He preached it. He taught it. And Paul is telling the Jewish people, look, you have such an advantage because you have the full revelation of God. You know how God was working throughout scriptures. You know how God was bringing the law and trying to help the people see the value of righteousness. You see those things, and other people, the Greeks, the Gentiles that are coming in, they are now just having to learn those things and get accustomed to them. And so let's move on. So this is a guy, Paul is trying to look at the guy, and he's probably heard these arguments before, trying to figure out ways to wiggle out of their responsibilities to God. So verse 5 it says, but some might say our sinfulness serves a good purpose, for it helps people see how righteous God is. Isn't it unfair then for him to punish us? This is merely a human point of view. So you see the question that's being asked right there. The interlocutor is saying, well, wait a minute. When we sin, well then it shows how bad we are. And so in contrast, it shows how good God is. So aren't we doing God a favor by by helping to highlight that contrast between God and man. This is a guy that wants to keep sinning. This is a guy that wants to keep disobeying God and is trying to find a way to justify it. And his way of justifying it is to say, well, okay, let's just pretend. What if people didn't realize how glorious God is, how wonderful God is? So by me sinning, they can see that God's more glorious. It's a wild accusation, but it's a lot of what weirder things come into our world today. When people today are saying God is inside of you and you make up your own laws, the idea that there are 7 billion tiny gods walking around this planet and each of us determine our strengths and our ability. None of them are almighty, and so you can see weird questions. Every generation is going to have a different set of ways that people try to manipulate God. So but some might say our sinfulness serves a good purpose, for it helps people see how righteous God is. Isn't it unfair then for him to punish us? This is merely a human point of view. Of course not. If God were not entirely fair, how would he be qualified to judge the world? So first, God has to be fair. So whatever it is that's happening, it's not unfair because God is always fair. But someone might still argue, so this is the interlocutor, how can God condemn me as a sinner if my dishonesty highlights his truthfulness and brings him more glory? So once again, the more I sin, the more God is glorified, is the argument that some people are making, that I'm justified in sinning, doing whatever I need, because God's going to be more glorified. And some people even slander us by claiming that we say the more we sin, the better it is. Those who say such things deserve to be condemned. So here Paul is getting to the crux of the problem. There are a lot of people throughout history, a lot of people in Christianity that want to justify their sin. And if you really want to justify your sin, what most people have to do is they have to continue to find a more radical way of talking about their sin in order to justify it. You have to try to outwit God. And so these interlocutors trying to outwit God, saying, wait a minute, by me sinning more, by me disobeying God more, isn't it better? Isn't it better? That happens today. I mean, you hear people say all the time. One of the things that I hate to hear people say is when they're like, heaven doesn't want me and hell's afraid of me. The idea that I'm not good enough for heaven, but I'm my own person, and therefore I have worked out my own salvation. Hell's scared of me, and so I'm my own man. And then that's that false idea that we can justify our sin, that our sin somehow makes us unique, beholden, to no one, and we can do what we want. And so it's a valuable question we need to hear and ask ourselves: are there ways that we're justifying sin in our life because we believe somehow God is going to be okay with my sin as opposed to others? All right, verse 9. Well then, should we conclude that we Jews are better than others? All right, so we just said, should we give up being Jews? And Paul said, no, don't give up being Jews. Oh, good, then the Jews are better than other people. And Paul's like, no, not at all. For we have already shown that all people, whether Jews or Gentiles, are under the power of sin. This is the way our logic works. In fact, a lot of times we try to do the counter argument first. Hey, it's probably no good being a Jew, right? Nobody wants to be Jews. Being Jews are awful. And Paul's like, no, it's good to be a Jew. Oh, okay, then it's better that we're a Jew. And who cares about the other person? He's like, no. Our world is not always two options. This is actually, and I want you to be careful, and I want you to watch this, because I see some of you all on Facebook and other places, and whenever you have a political argument, whenever you're talking about faith or things, what people like to do is to give you binary choices. It must be this or it's this. Must be this or it's this. And often that this or this are both untenable positions that we can't keep and be consistent with our faith. We give people two options. I mean, you know, last year's election, or the election cycle with Hillary and Trump, I saw so many people that finally got to the point where they were like, I'm voting for neither, because the world, our country, we like to give you two options, and if you support one option, people will yell at you, well, I can't believe you support a person like that. And you go to the other side and they're like, yeah, well, look at that person's done. And you realize there's flaws on all sides, but people make you make choices. And when you make a choice, they not only attribute the things you like to one choice, but they take all of the baggage and they attribute all of that to you. And it's why we cannot accept the fact that there are always two choices in every situation. We have to realize that God is often calling us to a different place entirely. And so you can have people on two different sides of the argument and both of them being wrong. It's not Jews or Gentiles. Pick the one that's going to get you closer to God. It's that Jews have sinned, Gentiles have sinned, and the correct place is when the Jews and Gentiles together come to find salvation that's in Jesus Christ. It's not one or the other. They are both on the same side. They're both on the side of sin, and Jesus is on the side of righteousness, but obviously, like the interlocutor, like so many of us, we're not asking the right question. We think, oh, I'm going to identify you based off of your race and identify you based off of your race, and then ask the question, who does God love? Well, the question of who does God love is not based off of race. The question of who is saved is not based off of race. So if you divide people by race and then ask who's faithful to God, you're going to realize you're looking at it the wrong way. Faith has nothing to do with race. Faith has nothing to do. Jesus blew that out of the water. The amount of times that he talked with and spoke with and told stories about the Samaritans. That was a despised race to the Jews. And Jesus wanted to make it clear that there's no such thing as a despised race to God. And that there are godly, faithful Samaritans of this despised race. Just like there are priests and Pharisees that are disobedient to God. All right, so I want you to keep that in mind, all right? I want you to keep that in mind. And that's relevant today as it is back in their day, because we still deal with these issues of race or other things that choose to divide us. We get divided by things, and we want to say, we talk about Democrats and Republicans or whatever, and there was a time when mainstream Christians were saying, well, you had to be a Republican, that religious right. You had to be a Republican to be a Christian. And that's not what God looks at. There's not a voting roll up in heaven. All right. It's something completely different. There's going to be the righteous and the unrighteous, and there's going to be a mix of all people on both sides. All right. So he's saying, no, not at all, for we have already shown that all people, whether Jews or Gentiles, are under the power of sin. So as the scripture says, so this is the next part, next verse, verse 10. As the scripture says, no one is righteous, not even one. No one is truly wise. No one is seeking God. All have turned away. All have become useless. No one does good, not a single one. Their talk is foul, like the stench from an open grave. Their tongues are filled with lies. Snake venom drips from their lips. Their mouths are full of cursing and bitterness. They rush to commit murder. Destruction and misery always follows them. They don't know where to find peace. They have no fear of God at all. So here we see, Paul bringing out the scripture and saying, hey, this is where it's written. This is what it's said about these things. Now let me go back to I usually up here have footnotes turned off, because when I do the Bible verses for church, I can highlight them, copy and paste, and if the footnotes are turned off, then they don't show up in the presentation, but you can turn footnotes on in yours if you're using your computer, and any of these little boxes after, you can click on them and it'll show you where you can find these verses, where you can so this is saying verses 3 through 12, chapter 3 verses 10 through 12 appear in Psalms 14 1 through 3 and Psalms 53 1 through 3. And then you can come down here and look at verse 15 and it shows you the passages where those are found. And then down here, so each of these you can find the passages where they are found, so that you can go back into the Old Testament and actually see where Paul is pointing out that these verses come from and what he's using as his justification. This is not something Paul's making up. These are words that were spoken before in the Psalms. They probably were sung at their times, and it was a way that they fully processed their faith. So obviously the law applies to those to whom it was given, for its purpose is to keep people from having excuses and to show that the entire world is guilty before God. No one can ever be made right with God by doing what the law commands. The law simply shows us how sinful we are. All right, and I want us to kind of end there. This is going to be where we wrap up today, but we still got a little more to say about it. What was the purpose of the law? You know, the interlocutor keeps asking, you know, aren't we Jews better because God's given us the law, because we're God's chosen people, because we have this history of Moses and Abraham and David and the prophets and Isaiah and all those guys? Aren't we better than other people? We have the law. We have the 10 Commandments. We have all the other laws that teach us how to live. And Paul is finally pointing out to them, haven't you realized that the purpose of the law is not to make us righteous? All right, the purpose of the law is not to make us righteous. I know we have the 10 Commandments, but you know, there's lots of other laws other than those. And even with the 10 Commandments, I think most of us struggle to keep all of them. I mean, there's some big ones that are, you know, we're not going to kill somebody today. You know, most of us are not going to commit adultery, although in our country, it is a fairly common thing for us to have premarital sex. It's a very common thing for us to have multiple marriages after divorces. And in all those instances in Scripture, they consider that adultery, unfaithfulness in our marriage. And so I don't think that's as uncommon as we think it is. They're, you know, giving false testimony or coveting your neighbor's donkey. I know they don't have a donkey, but you know, if they've got a nicer house, and you know, I mean, look at how many TV shows that are out there about celebrating celebrity life, and I don't know, one of the new YouTube commercials that I see all the time is about this fashion show week. What's the whole point of fashion show week? It's to make you envious of, oh, I wish I was that beautiful. I wish I had those new clothes. I wish things were elegant and exotic for me. That's that covetousness, wishing I had something that. And so even the 10 Commandments, we struggle to keep all of them. And if we can't keep them, well, then it means we're not righteous. If we fail on one of them, it means we're not righteous. So you see, the law's point is not to show us how to become righteous. The law is not to show us everything that we can do to become righteous. What the law shows us is that you must do all of these things. And if you mess up on even one of them, you're not righteous. Therefore, you need another way. And that's what Easter was all about. Easter was about God's other way. How can we make people right? How can we make people whole again? Well, we make people whole, we make people right by providing a way to atone, to pay the price for the damage that sin has caused. Pay the price for what we've done. You know, if you go and you know, you're at the store, you open your car door really hard and you hit somebody else's car and ding it, and they're watching you do it, you're gonna have to pay the price for the accident that you caused. You're gonna have to pay to get their door detailed, to get it fixed, whatever's going on. You have to pay the price. Well, paying the price for sin is just too much. We're going to learn here in a little bit. The price for sin, you know, for one sin is death. So to pay the price means you have to die. Well, that's an awful price to pay. If you have to die because you sin, everybody is going to die the moment we sin that first time. And God had a plan. God said, let me pay it for you. Yeah, but how could you do that? The price is death. It's like, don't worry. I'm going to send my son to pay it for you. Yeah, but the price is death. How much money are you going to send with them? How much gold are you going to send with them? And God says, don't worry. I'm going to send my son, and he's going to pay the price. You see why Easter is so important to us? Easter is God showing us that the law only reveals our sinful nature. But the law also shows us that there is a way, if someone could obey the law completely, that someone could pay the price. And that's what Jesus did on Easter. So I'm so glad you spent some time listening to us. I know there's some weird stuff that's going on here because we're in the middle of our Who's Your One Bible study thing. But I hope that those of you that are studying and do this with us, I'm going to post it so that it pops up at 10 o'clock. And I'm going to put a link in all the places that are there. Share this with people. Let people know. This is a good gateway for them to get into the discussion, our Romans discussion, and to go back and look at our Easter message. I look forward. We are going to do Wednesday night Bible study together. I will be out of my session by then, and so we'll be able to do Wednesday night together and worship together. Then study the Bible. Then we're doing minor prophets, and so I want to encourage you to be there and to watch that with us. Please pray for me today. Pray for my family. Pray for Kim at her place of work. And anytime you just drop her a text, I know that would be super awesome because she would really just appreciate having a smiley face emoji or a heart or just a kind, warm message during these long days where she is doing her best to help the people at her place stay calm, stay focused, to be able to live the life that God's given them and to survive and make it through the end of this COVID thing. So pray for her, lift her up as well, all right? And we're going to be praying for you in all we do. And if the rest of you want to get together, you're more than welcome to set up a way for you guys to get together. There, you can Zoom is free. I mean, you can do a Zoom free thing just like I do, and so one of you can try to set that up if you want to, or you just wait till Wednesday and we'll get together. All right, and we're gonna try to do that coffee thing too, like we did Sunday, more often. So I want to encourage you to be a part of that. All right, God bless you all. I'll see you later. I'm gonna upload this now, and you can watch with us and just be encouraged with each other. All right, God bless you. See you soon.